Last year when I journeyed to the faraway place of the mainland to pick up a car I had just bought, I used a few hours I had on this mainland before the ferry left to home to go game hunting and see what was left. When I was a wee lad and we had just moved to the island and we didn't have a ton of money, we would always, when we were on the mainland, go to Læsehesten, aka the Reading Horse. A chain of government subsidized used bookstores that also stocked videotapes, DVDs, CDs, cassettes, vinyls, any type of physical media really, including video games. Long story short, I figured that if any place had to survive the GameStop purge and maybe even thrive from it, and have the desire to stay open as much as possible, it would probably be that place, and it was. And I bought a ton of games, and I've actually been back quite a few times and bought some really good stuff. But it's a chain, which meant that there had to be others, and one very early morning in November, I found myself once again on the ferry heading to the fabled mainland to pick up yet another car. And while buying another car is always nice, my mind was somewhere else. My mind was on the Reading Horse location. I remember being fairly close by to where the car picking up place was. And this is the story of my quest to find one of Denmark's last game stores, the Reading Horse in Silkeborg. So I got off the ferry and then I drove behind my mother, who was dropping off her old car at the chop shop right here in Frederikshavn. And then she got in my car and we zoomed towards Horsens to pick up the car I had bought for her, a reasonably priced 2018 Citroën C4. We arrived in Horsens, which literally means horse town, a little before 11. And as the clock passed 11, the car was picked up, my mother was happy, and she headed north. And I headed towards my true destination, the Reading Horse in Silkeborg, which is a strange place to drive to when you're on the main motorway in Denmark. In my case, I was in Horsens, so the quickest way to get to Silkeborg was to drive through winding roads up hills, which is weird when you're from a place that's 8 meters above sea levels and you're literally not used to seeing the ground being neither above you or beneath you, and then through small forgotten towns until you reach another motorway, which will take you all of the rest of the way there to Silkeborg. As I was driving through Silkeborg, I made it to the center of the city after a fairly long drive through very slow traffic, but then the GPS kept saying go further, which I did. And then we made it out of the center and out into a residential area, and there I was beginning to dread that the store might not be there, that it might have gotten closed down and demolished, and that a new residential building was built on top of it. And while I was thinking that, I actually drove past the store because the sign is very small and there is no parking. But I made a round trip and parked at the Netto across the street, and there it was, or well, is. Another Reading Horse in the middle of fuck all nowhere in an area that many of you will find is hilariously named the Highlands. The size of the sign, or rather lack thereof, is apparently a sign of what is on the inside, because the store is very small, and unlike the one in Frederikshavn where the games take up around like half the store, they maybe only take about like 10% of space in here, confined to pretty much like 2 or 3 small shelves. I didn't have a ton of time anyways. It had taken about an hour to drive here from Horsetown, so I quickly went through the shelves and picked up the handful of games that I thought were interesting. As I was picking through the shelves and finding games I wanted to buy, I understood why there weren't a lot of games here at the store. The guy behind the counter just looked at the stack of 7 games I had and then said 340, which is around 45 euros. And at those prices for those games, I'm sure that there were once many more games in here, but that they've all simply been sold due to how low the asking price is. Like letting me walk out of here with a White Van Racer, a 200 euro game, for basically nothing. Overjoyed that I had found a game store with great prices and that my trip to the mainland had practically paid for itself since the purchase of an automotive vehicle due to the acquisition of a copy of the hit video game White Van Racer, I literally ran out of the store and skipped back to my car. But aside from a criminally low priced White Van Racer, what else did I get at the store? Let's have a look. City Crisis is a game that I have never heard of and I didn't know what to expect at all, but having seen people like Akiko and Thor High Heels get a blast out of the urban survival simulator genre games on the same platform, I figured that this could maybe be like that, and it's not. But it's not bad though. It's an arcade rescue helicopter simulator thing. Each mission is flying around the city and rescuing civilians by lowering down a man in a harness and grabbing them, and then putting out the fire that they have been trapped by using a combination of water missiles and a regular water cannon. The missions then get harder and harder, forcing you to start thinking conservatively about your resources, making trip backs to the helipad to drop off survivors when your chopper is full, and prioritizing who to save, and it's all around pretty alright. If you've been here since around 2018-ish, you know that I love the first Buffy the Vampire Slayer video game, which released exclusively on the original Xbox. That game told a story set during Season 3, and that story was full of references to things that would happen in the later seasons and even foreshadowed the very end of the series, which wouldn't happen for another few years. That combined with the amazing combat system that perfectly emulated the TV show's action, making you think and act like the Slayer and grind down the enemy before doing a cool finishing blow, or cheesing the system and just doing a quick deflecting move and then a killing blow, ending a 2-minute fight in mere seconds, made for a really compelling game that's probably one of my top 5 favorite licensed games of all time. Despite being a fan of this and the TV show of course, I never did get the sequel, which launched on the GameCube and the PS2 and not the Xbox for some reason. And now that I'm playing it, I'm glad that I never picked it up. Whereas the first game has a plot that perfectly blends into Season 3 and really carves out a place in the canon for itself. Chaos Bleeds, on the other hand, is a sloppy time travel / dimensional travel plot that allows former baddies from previous seasons to make appearances as boss battles. And whereas the first game had an in-depth combat system with over 50 different attacks, requiring the player to chain together combos and change those combos on the fly to fit the situations they were facing, Chaos Bleeds, on the other hand, is a sloppy beat 'em up where you knock down the enemy's health and then you trigger a kill move, and that's it, and the enemies they just kind of spawn out of nowhere. And whereas the first game had interesting levels that used locations from the show as inspirations and created puzzles and level design influenced by those locations, as well as place enemies and traps that fit into this situation, Chaos Bleeds, on the other hand, also features locations from the show, but they are linear hallways that vaguely look like the locations they are inspired by, and they all look the same. The game is overall sloppy, it's a bad time, and I definitely won't be coming back to it. Oni is a game developed by a pre-Halo Bungie and published by a pre-GTA 3 Rockstar. And it's an anime-inspired Borderline Ghost in the Shell copycat beat-em up about a purple-haired cyberpunk police lady who discovers a conspiracy threatening the already fucked world that is just a couple of domed cities on Earth, with the remainder of the planet being a desolate wasteland with air that's not breathable. Oni's claim to fame is definitely its interesting combat system, which maps jumps, crouches, punches and kicks to the 4 shoulder buttons, and they can be combined to create a variety of different moves. And while it's always safe to do a slide kick and then repeat that until the enemy dies, there is a real sense of accomplishment to pulling off some very tricky combinations and just taking out 3 heavy armored dudes in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, it doesn't run well on PS2, and I've been spoiled by originally having played this on PC, as it was a pack-in game for a computer magazine in the early 2000s, which I think is how a lot of people originally played the game. White Van Racer is a terrible game, but it's worth a lot of money and can pay for this entire lot, so This is why you always check the disc inside your game boxes when you buy anything, both to make sure that there is a disc in it, but also that it's the right disc. I don't blame the guy selling this to me for this. This was my mistake, he just works there. So yeah, I scammed myself. I thought that I was scamming some used bookstore that's like run and operated by people with disabilities. But, you know, karma came in and then scammed me. And that's quite alright. That's what I get for being a cocky fucking shit. I got and I deserve it. Well. Zone of the Enders is a mecha game produced and or directed by Hideo Kojima, and that means that the introductory cutscene is 10 minutes long and that it still manages to forget to tell the player very vital information about the plot. The story is that evil mechas attack some sort of base or ship, and then a whiny anime boy is the only survivor of the attack, and he manages to pilot a mech and then fend off the attack. As the whiny anime boy, you then get in contact with another faction, and that's the start of an epic adventure that will take you across the galaxy. And it's pretty good, but I think I already own the HD version on 360 and I rather play it on that with its shortened load times and upscaled graphics.
We're here at last.
Yes. How long I've waited for this moment.
My go-to experience in arcades is and has always been rail shooters. I love them, and if there is one in an arcade, I'm playing it, and if there is a console conversion for cheap at a retro store, I'm buying it. And that is what Vampire Knight for the PS2 is. And it also helps a lot that the game supports the G-Con 45 and the G-Con 2, which are very cheap gun cons for as far as gun cons go, with the 45 going for as little as €20 on occasion. The game itself is developed by a Sega studio, and if you've played House of the Dead, you know exactly what you're in for. Monsters will appear on screen and you will need to shoot them and then reload in between salvos of enemies, and when enemies are defeated the game will move on to a new location and there you will shoot more enemies. The further you get into the game, the tougher the enemies get, and they will start to jump all over the place and sometimes even teleport, and some of them will have glowing weak spots that you need to shoot to take them down. The story is of course a little cheesy, which doesn't detract from the experience, and the voice acting is done by those two people who did all of the middle of the road voice acting in the 2000s. If you're looking for a cheap rail shooter, this is not a bad one to add to the library. And finally I also picked up a couple of OG Xbox games, Transworld Surf and Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer. The latter was my introduction to surfing and the reason my mother worries every time the wind blows, and I've been meaning to go back to it ever since and replay it, and since Transworld Surf was also there, I decided to pick that one up as well. But how do you make a game about surfing? Skateboarding makes sense. Skateboarding is primarily done in skate parks, and it's very easy to take a skate park and turn it into a video game. And it's easy to take the ramps and the pipes and the rails and whatnot and put them into the real world locations, which is what Tony Hawk's Pro Skater does so well with its levels. And there are so many moves and so many skate styles, so you have a lot of variety in how you play as well. And you can take all the coolness of skateboarding and all the cool things you can do and where you can do them, and you can make them so much cooler and bigger and better and more extreme because it's a video game. Surfing is a completely other deal. The only type of thing you can surf is a wave, and waves are all the same, and the only level you can make in a surfing game is water. Sure, you can change up the location and change the color of the water, but that's all scenery. The only thing you can really do in a surfing game is essentially the half-pipe minigame from Tony Hawk, an endless wave you can keep doing tricks on, and that is essentially what Transworld Surf is. You select surfers from a cast of characters who weren't famous enough to get into Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer, and then you take on a wave and then you surf it and do tricks, and when you're close enough to water or you wipe out, you call a jet ski and then you get pulled back out to sea and do another wave. And it's fine, but it's so fucking far from being anywhere close to as entertaining as a Tony Hawk game is. And I think the people that made Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer understood that very early into development. So while the game is largely the same experience of just surfing an endless wave and doing cool tricks, it's framed as you the player going on a worldwide surf cruise with the best surfers in the world. And also motocross man Travis Pastrana and skateboarder Tony Hawk, as well as a tiki guard and a surf zombie. And you go to these famous surf locations around the world, and when you arrive there's live action footage that explains the history of the location, and we get to see the actual real life surfers from the game attempt to surf there, and it's very cool. That coupled with the fact that there are hours of behind the scenes footage and unlockable mini documentaries makes Kelly Slater perhaps still not a good game, but a very interesting one if you're a surfer. And especially if you are like me, a surfer, a history buff, a tech head, and a nerd, as it both gives the viewer/player an insight into surfing, but also more specifically what surfing was like at the turn of the millennia, how the sport was rapidly changing and evolving from being something that very few people were interested in and even fewer people could live off of via sponsorships and competitions, to now where there are thousands upon thousands of people living off of surfing. And most of them aren't sponsored or doing comps, they are vlogging. And we actually get to see the very early attempts at vlogging surfing through the various videos in the game. There is plenty of focus on how to capture what they do on camera, which back then was quite the hurdle because there weren't any waterproof GoPro knockoffs that you could just buy for €20, casing included. No. Instead we get this very quaint little video about the very expensive and very enormous POV surf cam that they use to capture video from a surfer's perspective. And it's this whole rig, and they are all very impressed by how small it is and how awesome it is that they actually have the technology to pull off a shot like that, and it's just a little precious to watch. If you're a surfer or even remotely interested in surfing or a fan of the Tony Hawk games, I would say give this a watch. Play. It's fun seeing how they tackle a whole other sport, and such a niche one at that for whatever reason became so wildly popular even though it's just sledding on water. And seeing what they do with that and how they distract from the fact that there's not a whole lot of game is super fascinating. And if you just want to watch all the videos, it's an OG Xbox game, so there is a cheat code that will just unlock everything and you can just watch it from the menu. So that was the Reading Horse in Silkeborg. I got 7 games for roughly €45, and was the White Van Racer an actual White Van Racer, I would have made quite the deal, but what exactly is everything worth? Well, I actually still made quite the deal. While most of the games hovered around €5 or so with only Kelly Slater and Buffy breaking 10, it didn't look like I got my money's worth. But when factoring in shipping costs, which are around €10 to €15 per game, the value actually comes out like this. Kelly Slater's 23, City Crisis 20, Oni 19, Transworld Surf 24, Buffy 24, Vampire Knight 26, and surprisingly, a disc-only Zone of Enders 20, for a total value of €156, which is a profit of €111. Or well, a third of that is profit and the remaining 2/3 are just saved costs. All around not a bad haul, even though I kind of scammed myself by not checking the White Van Racer game box. But we're not done. In the next video we'll hit up the location in Frederikshavn that I've been to before, and we'll see what deals we can make there, if any. And then it's time to go home and snuggle up with the pets and have a few beers and sleep. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.
Passion rules the game, self-defended.